Sherry has come in at the last minute and agreed to kind of have a chat with me for you guys. I think she has a wonderful story. Her Twitter handle, if you don't know, you should follow her, is My Journey. Could you spell that for us?
MYJRNY.
Like that, just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah. And she is a devout Journey fan. How do you describe it?
Well, I mean, it's a lifelong thing. I've made peace with it a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we feedbacking?
I think so. I'm gonna keep an ear on it though.
Okay.
Any advice? Don't look at each other. Should we swap? Don't talk at her.
Do I need to move this over somewhere? Up. A moment.
So I'll introduce Sherry, and I'll kind of like just circle around and walk around and try and diffuse this sound situation. Basically, Sherry has done some amazing things. She works for the Good Egg Group. She's the communications director. And she has a really interesting story with regards to that. But more importantly, she's taken the initiative in her life to start doing big things. And one of those big things is that she organizes a thing called Sherry's Living Room, where it's her living room, and bands come and they play in her living room for everybody. Okay.
This means I get to do a mic drop at some point. Pretty excited.
And maybe we can arrange some crowd surfing as well, if you'd like that.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to jump right in and start with some questions, Sherry. So where were you when you started to kind of think that maybe the foodie in you was wondering about a job with Good Egg Group?
Well, it kind of started in 2009. I had a bad year. I was going through a divorce and needed a better job. And so I started working at the city of Oklahoma City, and I thought it was fantastic, except I got there and I wasn't any good at my job. And then the budget got cut for the upcoming year, and I could see that I was about to be laid off. So I started doing the hunt, going to the PRSA website, where there's 200 people looking for the same jobs that you're looking for. I just wasn't finding what I wanted. So I took a risk. I DM'd Keith Paul, the president of a Good Egg Dining Group. We'd met a couple times in person, and we talked online all the time on Twitter. I DM'd Keith and said, we need to get coffee next week. And he replied back and said, am I in trouble? And I said, no, I want to chat you up a little bit. So we met at Slingers, and I told him what I thought of his company, which it's an amazing group with lots of great brands and good food and lots of great word of mouth, but I couldn't tell that he had anybody doing their PR or managing that kind of stuff for him. And he said they didn't. And I said, well, I think that I'm your person for that, and I'm not asking you to give me a job today, but I would like to give you a proposal. So I met him a week later at the Good Egg office with a detailed proposal and just a pitch. And he entertained it, and he gave me some feedback and said, I want you to come back in a week and present it to the partners of the company. So I did. And he said, when you're going to come and, present this to the partners of the company, we'll let you know in like a week or so that you can kind of move on with your life. And so I came back and presented to the people who are investors in a Good Egg Dining Group. Took a lot of tough questions, and as he was walking me out, he said, can you just wait in my office for a few minutes? And I said, sure, why not? I've got nothing else to do. And I did, and 10 minutes later, he came back and offered me the job. And I walked out to my car and canceled my interview at Chesapeake.
Good for you. So what have you learned about reaching people working for Good Egg?
We do a lot of reputation management and earned media. We don't do a lot of advertising, at least not in the traditional sense. We have a lot of internal policies about being good eggs. We all call each other good eggs. I make lots of puns at the office about going back to the carton and
puns are awesome.
Yeah, I'm a punny gal, and see.
This is your crowd, isn't it, Sharon?
No, this is it. And Ryan Drake, watch out. I'm maybe after your stand-up audience. So we are restaurant people, and we make great food, but our focus really is good people. We call ourselves food people. And we have an internal policy called extreme hospitality, and that is part of that's for the customers. We try to do everything to have them have amazing experiences, but that's also an internal mutual policy for us. We treat each other with extreme care and concern and respect and interest and compassion. And it reaches front to back of the house, dishwashers, all the way up the food chain to people who work in my office.
So on day one, you looked at what they had, and what were your priorities?
Getting my head above water. I'd never really worked in a restaurant. My restaurant experience was 1 month as a hostess at the Olive Garden in Las Vegas in 1995.
You shared that with them in your job interview.
I may have.
Yeah.
Or maybe I kept that for week one. Anyway, by that time it was too late. I didn't really know the industry. I just loved food, and I had a passion for it, and it just fascinates me. The cooking of it, the buying of it, the color and composition of it, it's all interesting. So while I learned my bearings on the industry, I just set out to start storytelling. I tweeted my face off. I posted constantly on Facebook and other apps that have come and gone since then. Instagram wasn't a thing back then, but I pathed a lot. Yeah, someone remember that? Mostly it was just constant Twittering and showing people the behind-the-scenes stuff. That just whatever interested me, it was just my playground. I just went in there and had fun with it and story told as much as I could. And I think it got people excited.
Can you give us an example of kind of story you might tell?
I was going through photos last night of my early days at Good Egg, and I went to this a chef's kind of dinner called Odyssey de Culinaire in Tulsa, and it's beautiful, like 7-course. Each course is made by a chef, so there's like 7 chefs back there laboring with assistants and making this beautiful food. And that's interesting. But I want to know how that stuff comes together. How do you feed 300 people a gourmet meal that's hot and wonderful? So half of that beautiful dinner, I was back in the kitchen, like taking patterns of the plates, all lining up, and asking different, the Tulsa chefs or the Oklahoma City chefs, like, how did this happen, or why did you choose this, and just lots of questions. And
so
then just
how does your audience break down then? Because that sounds like you're really talking to foodies there.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be other people who you're wanting to talk to.
Sure. How I look at it when I'm talking, especially back then, to people, I'm just being myself and getting paid to tweet and eat, but it's kind of like that's the inner part of the food world, but getting people who are influencers excited about that, early adopters, things like that, they start to tell their friends and it starts to spread. And I feel like the work that I do, I've just seen it radiate through time. I mean, there's still people who have no idea what Tucker's Onion Burgers is. I mean, there are probably people in this room who don't know who Tucker's Onion Burgers is. Doesn't mean we're not busy, line out the door all the time.
Okay.
And it's also kind of hopeful because there's plenty of room to grow. It's not like I have to be so selfish with my marketing efforts that I have to have all the customers at once.
That's a really interesting strategy. So it's not a lowest common denominator strategy, and you're not trying to reach everybody.
No.
You're basically saying, we are the people who know great food.
Yes.
And that message will kind of radiate.
Well, and I've seen the food culture has changed so drastically in Oklahoma City in the last 5 years. It's not the same place as it used to be, and there's a lot more local options. And we personally have a ton more competition, but it's hard to view it as competition because a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And I tweet just as much of the food at S&B or Picasso's or West's as I do when I go to Republic or Cheevers or Iron Star.
Okay, I love that. So what you're saying is that your competitors are your friends because what you're trying to change is the community.
Right.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's kind of explain to me what Sherry's Living Room is and how it started.
So about a year ago, right around now, last year, I was hanging out on Facebook, and I follow a ton of musicians, and I constantly add new bands to my feed and research things as I find them on Spotify or whatever. And I saw this girl asking if anybody in Oklahoma City had space to host a concert, and it just planted a seed. I didn't host her, but I did ask my next door neighbor, a guy named David Broyles. You may know him as Dr. Pants. He and his wife, Casey Clifford, have been full-time. There have been periods where they're full-time musicians and they just tour, 100 days a year. And a lot of those, because they're folk musicians, are in living rooms and small spaces. I said, Eddie, do you think my living room would do something like that? And he's like, probably, yeah, it looks like it. And I was like, just kind of put that back there. And 2 weeks later, he's like, I have an idea. And I said, what? He's like, well, there's this woman named Marianne Call who's on tour from Alaska, and I've always wanted to work with her, and we've talked about it for years, and it's just never worked out. And Dr. Paynes is experimenting with these acoustic sets, and Marianne and I want to work together, so I want to open for Marianne, and we need a space, and we were thinking about renting one, but we could just do your living room. And I said, sure. It would be a test to see if it works or not, and that'd be fun, and I love to say yes to things, obviously. And
Zing.
and so we did it, and it was great. We had 30 or 40 people show up, and Marianne was lovely. I hosted her and her guitarist in the house that night. They slept and ate, and it was great. But one of the attendees at that concert was a guy who I had just met named Jack Fowler, and he said, have you thought about doing this again? And I said, well, if you'll play, because I knew that he had a past in the music world. And he said, well, that's what I meant. And so I booked Jack, and he got an opener for himself, and the show was amazing, and we had lots of special moments, including Casey Clifford, the next door neighbor, was babysitting that night. I mean, she was watching her child while her husband got to go to the show, and she was kind of sad that she missed it. And after everybody left, she came over, and her and Jack sat in my living room and swapped songs. And it was just me and Jack and Casey and my friend Rick, who helps me run the Twitter account. It was so special. It was just like tears and chills. And I thought, okay, well, I have to do this forever now.
So there is a pre-Good Egg Sherry and a post. And it strikes me that the post is a badass. And you're basically saying yes to things. Could you talk about that? Like, what's the difference between you now and then?
I got a tweet on a Lamar billboard about 5 years ago, and I still think of it all the time. And what I said was, it's never, and there's a typo in it. And it was just because I get in a hurry, and I am not a great typist, but there's a typo in it. And so whenever I post, I'm like, hey, you don't know the difference between 2 and 2. It says it's never too late to live the life you want. And that's just kind of a personal philosophy of mine. I'm 38. I'll be 39 in December. And I absolutely think that I've got, 50 years of adventure ahead of me. And I just keep plugging at it. Just say yes. Now, I say yes to too much. So I have had a lot of soul searching probably in the last 3 years of really thinking about where I want to spend my time and what is your yes, what no is your yes going to create? What are you saying no to that this yes is going to create?
The opportunity cost.
Yeah.
So where have you taken that Sherry's Living Room? Because it's been a while now.
Yeah, it's been a year. I think that I have a show on September 15th. I think that's my 13th show. It's my 12th or 13th show. A guy named Leif Valbeck that I met at the Newport Folk Festival. I'm a festival junkie, and I went there. It was like a pilgrimage, and he was a performer there, and I introduced myself and told him I booked music, and it turns out he had a hole in his tour schedule, and so this guy from Montreal is playing in my living room on the 15th, and I've kind of built the acts. We were talking about this earlier. I started with just people I knew, people who I knew would say yes, who would not say no to coming and playing in my living room, and I would just hustle as much as I could to get seats in the chairs, butts in the chairs. But as I've had repeat customers and people in the room, I want to grow it. And it doesn't mean I can only fit 50 people in the space. I usually have 30 to 40, but I've had 2 or 3 shows that were 50s. I can't get more people, but I can get, I want to say higher quality acts, but that's not entirely accurate because I love everybody I've booked. But maybe higher draw people, increase the demand for the space so that the more sold out shows I can get, the better I can book the acts, the higher I can pay the artists, the bigger guarantees I can give. And so I've kind of gone from people I know to people who have a good local draw to people who are national touring musicians who happen to be from Oklahoma to regional touring acts to national touring acts. And I just want to keep increasing that kind of quality until maybe one day I don't even have to tell you who's playing that month in Sherry's living room. You're just going to show up knowing that it's going to be a face-melting experience.
It strikes me that that's a very similar strategy to your strategy with the Good Egg Dining Group, which is be amazing, know your stuff. Every time I try and ask Sherry about a specific tactic that she uses or something really highly actionable, she kind of deflects the question in this way, which is, I just tell the stories and and it happens. Which I think, what's the secret to that though? How do you make that work?
Be authentic.
There
right?
You go. Okay.
I mean, when you were saying that stuff, I was, and we're going to talk a little bit about my life coaching stuff in a second, but one of my favorite authors or favorite humans is Brene Brown, and she is a shame and vulnerability researcher, and she speaks about authenticity and our human need of love and belonging. As soon as I found her work, I read all of her work twice, and then I started taking online courses of her work and really getting into living wholeheartedly. And I guess I've done that all along. I've just gotten a little bit better at it as the years have worn on, and I find that I get a positive return from just being the most myself I can manage.
Right. I'm like the semi-skeezy marketing version, and you're like the real deal.
Yeah, but if you ask me to produce some analytics, I will just go, no. I mean, I can't. I'm not good at measuring. I just do what works and do it well and try to get people excited.
Oh, that's awesome. So why life coaching?
I think a lot, through the years, I think about what do I do when I should be working? And at one point that answer was, well, I tweet. Like I said on Twitter and Last FM, and I can't remember. There was a song sharing service that was super popular like 5 years ago. We would all just like Google these songs. Not Turntable, right before that. Anyway, doesn't matter. YouTube took over all the feeds, and all the music got really not very good quality. So it was social media, and then I got a job in social media, and I loved it, and I still do. But there are periods of time where I get burned out on the sharing of every single moment, and the feeling like you have to be in constant learn mode and whatnot. So I started. I look at where do I spend my time? Well, it was music, right? So I went from social to music, and I still spend a lot of time in all those places. I don't really let go of stuff. I just keep adding things into the mix. But I noticed I was spending a lot of time talking to people, talking to friends, counseling people, helping people through tough life situations, or giving advice when it was asked for, and sometimes when it wasn't. Ask my sister; she's got a lot of that. But I was kind of in like this little crisis mode about a year ago. I didn't know if I wanted to stay with social media or if I wanted to I wanted to do music full time. I didn't know how that would work. I hired Kathleen Shannon as a life coach. She spoke last year, and through her process, she's like, Sherry, I think you're a life coach. I'm like, well, I don't, maybe. And she's like, no, you spend a ton of time, trying to help people along. I'm not a psychologist. I don't want to help people who have like real serious, emotional issues. I just want to help people open doors. I really think that all we need are inside us, but sometimes we let other things be in the way of unlocking that special thing that propels our life forward. So I want to learn how to do that with like real tools. And I was accepted and enrolled in a place called Interchange Coaching and Counseling Institute in San Francisco. For the next year, I'll go 1 weekend a month and learn that. And I mean, just to brag on my boss a little bit, I sort of nervously told Keith Paul that I was going to be doing this, and he's like, "Oh, that's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Tell me more about it." He like asked me a ton of questions about it. And when I would put in a time request, like my first is October, to get great airfare, I kind of need to go not on Friday or Saturday flying. I kind of have to be a little bit, extend my trip. And I was like, I kind of want to be able to telecommute this day and half of this day. And he was like, that sounds great. Just keep me in the loop and keep me informed. I really want to know what's going on with you.
So one thing that folks may or may not know about you is that you make incredible toffee.
I do.
And Sherry currently has an Indiegogo campaign running where you can go and purchase some of her toffee, and she's using it to fund the life coaching course. But you can also pre-book life coaching session.
You can.
Which I was super excited about.
I've got toffee, I've got life coaching. Ryan Parrott, a local chef, has offered some private cooking classes, open-ended, like he'll teach you whatever you want to learn. And then I do have a few spaces where I will teach you the craft and art of my toffee recipe with a few free gifts. So if you're inclined to learn what I do and maybe do it better and maybe put me out of business, that would be fantastic, because I think about not doing the toffee every Christmas. It's a side business of mine in December. I just can't, I feel like I'm disappointing people if they don't get this toffee here in the metro. Mm. And it really, I used to make it as gifts, and then I had to tell people I can't make anymore, I can't afford to. And they said, well, if you'll just make it, we'll pay for it. So I did. So the first year I made money, I made 20 pounds of toffee. And the next year, I made 40. And I was like, okay, this can get real. Last year, I made 100. I'm worried about this year.
Yeah.
Concerned. So there's a chance I may not make it this year, and the only way to get it is through the Indiegogo campaign. Plus, I make more look, Ashley Sellers, you need to turn that frown upside down. So, well, you should buy it through the campaign. That way you guarantee that you're going to get your Crackalicious toffee.
Scarcity.
Right, and it's not tactical. I'm just trying to be Sherry.
So Sherry, I want to end with a question, if I may. Or maybe you have a few other things that you want to share afterwards, but this will be my last question, which is that there may be somebody here tonight who is feeling trapped in their life. What advice would you have for them?
It's really easy to get stuck. It's really easy to get sort of marred down in comparison and fear and not good enough kinds of feelings. And it's real easy for me to say, well, just don't. It's not always, but it's not simple like that. And especially if you've, with me, I've got depression issues. And so on top of just life being kind of hard, it's hard to be a human. To add something else on top of that, it can be pretty difficult. But knowledge is power, and going out and learning more about what it means to be a human has been hugely beneficial for me. I cannot recommend enough the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. It changed my life. And part of it was getting validation that I was doing the right things, and then part of it was oh God, Oh, that's why that's never worked, because I've been doing it all wrong. So I think I should read Brene Brown. And then when you finish all that, read some Eckhart Tolle. I think it's pretty important.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Thank you for sharing your journey. Do you have any final things for us? I'm going to ask some questions. I'll open the floor for some questions.
No, I want to answer questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Sherry?
Hello.
I have not a question, but I just tweeted out the link to Sherry's Indiegogo on the Confluence Con hashtag. If you guys want to go support her right the hell now.
And the Indiegogo the link is on my Instagram profile and my Twitter profile, and it's kind of I publish my Facebook. If you want to friend me on Facebook, I'll accept it. I accept everybody, but I also make 99% of my posts public, so you don't have to. You can just creep on. But there's links on there too, if you want to. And you don't have to get toffee, like if you're anti-candy. Sorry about you. But you can still support me. I would be incredibly grateful, and you know, what goes around comes around. I feel like the more you give, the more you get. Yes.
Dick.
I want to double your production to 200 this year at coffee. But could you tell me again the name of the training center in San Francisco that does the coaching?
Yes. It's called Interchange, INTER, change, all one word, Counseling Institute. And if you want to go there, tell them I sent you, because then I'll get like a credit. I can go back for cheaper next year.
Yeah, when Sherry's all booked up, everybody know that Dick Rush is making his way as a life coach, and he'll be fabulous too, I can tell you.
And a question I get a lot with the life coaching is like, oh, you're going to abandon ship. You're going to quit your job and be a life coach. Maybe. But Good Egg Dining is now, by the time I finish this program, it's like 600 people. Plus, it'll be around 10 restaurants if you count the multiple Tuckers, maybe 12 restaurants by then. I think that any corporation would be brilliant to have somebody like that on staff to help people through the human experience. It helps with that, cultivating good people and reducing turnover and whatnot. So it could be something like that, or I could just be like the most badass friend you've ever had, because I've kind of figured out how to be a human, and I can pay that forward. Or I could start a side business, or I could go full-time, who knows? I'm trying to just leave myself completely open to the experience and see where the universe wants me to go.
Yeah, embrace the uncertainty. Thank you very much, Sherry.